This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Karil Kaprizzov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Karil, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den. And welcome in, everyone. Episode number 94 here on the Huskies Warming House Podcast. Crazy. We are 6 episodes away from the big 100, Nick. But speaking of things that have been away from what they're supposed to be near, the Minnesota Wild have been absolutely decimated with injuries. And we're going to talk, of course, about that and a lot about some Minnesota Wild stuff, the Karil Kaprizzov injury, a little bit about our impressions of some rookies and things like that. We're also going to do a quick kind of preview and look around the college hockey world this week. Of course, men's and women's hockey was off this weekend, unintentionally or unexpectedly, if you will. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the broadcast side of things in the NHL now that we're a little over halfway through. You know, ESPN, TNT, and even maybe some Valley Sports, what used to be Fox Sports North, and kind of give our impressions on that as well. So you won't want to miss it. And we'll start, as always, with Center Ice View News and Notes and the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup. Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
The Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup. Noah, of course, lots of postponement news. Unfortunately, this week is what kind of grabs the headline. So this will be a much shorter weekly roundup as not a lot of action taking place. As everybody knows, St. Cloud State was supposed to both men's and women's host UMD this weekend. Both were postponed due to COVID-19. From what I'm hearing, it did originate with the Bulldogs side of things. But nonetheless, conference games for both men's and women's postponed. And for the men's, quick reaction for that would be, you come off a sweep against Bemidji, you want to keep that train rolling, won't able to do so, and still have to look forward to next week to see what they can do to keep that momentum going. But nonetheless, have to wait one more week to see both the men's and women's in action. Meanwhile, Minnesota Wild, professionally, some postponements as well. Ottawa, Winnipeg, and Edmonton was postponed in last week's action. And a big reason for this, Noah, is that the NHL just simply says we don't want to play games in front of no fans. Canada has essentially gone into a large group lockdown yet again with the rise of COVID-19. So therefore, NHL, again, postponing those games until further notice, just to see if essentially the situation in Canada can get a little bit better than it is now. So what's next? SCSU going back to college hockey will travel to Denver next week. Now, again, Denver had their weekend series against Omaha postponed, so we'll keep our eyes very close attention to if anything develops from there. Also, the women's hockey team will host Ohio State next weekend. Men's team 12-6 overall on the year. The women's team 7-12-1. They're starting to find a little bit of traction, a little bit more as of we turn the calendar into 2022. But nonetheless, that is what's on tap for both of those teams as we head into the middle of January. Now, for the Minnesota Wild tonight, what's next up will be tonight as they host the Washington Capitals, the Great Eight coming into town. And then after that, they'll have to wait till next Friday, the 14th, as they will host the Anaheim Ducks, followed by a trip to the Avalanche there in Denver, which will be on the 17th. Now, mind you, probably unintentionally, Noah, that's sort of the theme of this episode. Maybe some good that comes out of this. Of course, many injuries continue to pile up in this Minnesota Wild squad. We'll probably dive into a little bit of that a little bit later on. But, big one, of course, Karil Kaprizzov, again, was checked heavily into the boards against Boston on Thursday night. He did not return after he left in the second period. But the Wild were able to take home a 3-2 very gutsy win off of the first NHL goal and game-winning goal from Matt Boldy. Again, their 2019 first-round pick. So, again, we have no really idea what Kaprizov is dealing with, and to be expected, keeping everything pretty close to the chest with him. So we'll kind of have to wait and see what updates will come out of that. Hopefully Kaprizov can lace up for the Wild here sometime soon. In other news, though, Columbus's Patrick Laine, the former number 2 overall pick, has returned after a 19-game absence from the ice, while Tampa Bay also got Nikita Kucherov back after he missed 32 games. So a couple of big snipers coming back after some injury news here around the National Hockey League.
Yeah, and how good is that Pierre-Luc Dubois trade looking for the Winnipeg Jets? They're probably going to try to lock him up long-term. He's had a really good start to the season, too, and we all kind of wondered if the change of scenery was going to be good for both players. Well, one player for sure. The other one, Patrick Laine. I mean, Columbus isn't that good, but he also hasn't gotten to play quite a bit this year too. So I think we haven't really gotten a look at what he's going to look like in that sweater. But he's certainly going to have to earn it in the second half. To wrap up this week's news, like you mentioned, very short weekly roundup. We have a professional tryout offer in the middle of the season. A little bit of a minor trade and a non-COVID injury. Technically 2 of them because Jonas Brodin and basically the Minnesota Wild continue to add to that list. But in other news, let's start with the trade news, shall we? Staying in the Central Division, Chicago's Alex Nylander, who's the brother of William Nylander, was traded to Pittsburgh for forward Sam Lafferty. So if you're wondering who the heck these guys are, Nylander hasn't played in the NHL since the 2020 season. He tore his meniscus, missed all of last season, and has been playing with Rockford in the AHL pretty much the entire year. 12 points, 23 games for him. In the minor leagues. Lafferty, meanwhile, a decent little pickup, 21 points in 94 career NHL games across roughly about 3 seasons. So,
and you know what this means, Noah, real quick, because Pittsburgh has been, I don't know if we're going to call it lucky or absolute genius, but this is how they take a depth piece like Alex Nylander, somehow making great. He's going to be the story of why they win the Stanley Cup this year.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It goes back to, of course, the Jake Gensel days, the Brian Rust days, guys that turned into producers. And not that, I mean, Jake Gensel has always been a good hockey player, but, the other thing that helps too, when you put him right in shotgun with Sidney Crosby, it doesn't hurt your hurt your game either, regardless of how old Sidney Crosby is getting. I was listening to somebody mention the other day, they're like, yeah, well, Crosby, he's 34, he's getting old, he's not the same player he is. And I'm like, he's still a top 6 forward, any team in the National Hockey League. Like, I'd take him in a heartbeat. So,
and you missed Teddy Bluger on that list too, to talk about, some of that young depth that emerged to be, kind of a leading playoff, contributor for the Penguins in recent years as well.
Yeah. Isn't he a former Mankato Maverick though? So
yes, horns up. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. We can't give Alex Micheletti the satisfaction. Come on. We can't be doing that.
It's okay. We have plenty to take him back down to reality. It's fine.
Yeah, that's fair. Speaking of things back to reality and players getting older, 34-year-olds, if you will, Tuukka Rask, longtime Bruins netminder, he signed a professional tryout offer with Providence in the AHL, the Boston's AHL affiliate. He's expected to play on January 14th. That's the next time that the Bruins of the minor leagues are supposed to play. They were actually supposed to play today on Saturday, but that got postponed, so they're waiting a week. And he expects to only be in the net for a game or 2 in the AHL and then hopefully make the return up to the NHL. I tell you what, the Bruins goaltending tandem, Jeremy Swayman, Linus Ullmark, has done a decent job where Tuukka Rask is going to have a little bit of an uphill battle. He tore his labrum in June. He was expected to miss time at least through the middle of this month. That's kind of why the midseason signing is happening. He has been practicing with the Bruins club in recent months while rehabbing, though. So that is a good sign for him. But yeah,
how awkward is that?
Yeah.
For those who, who watch hockey, right, and think it's just easy, it's Tuukka Rask and he's, a great goaltender. When you have for half of a season, like you mentioned, Ullmark and Swayman, who I think have played very, very good, this presents kind of a conundrum. And it kind of seems Tuukka Rask, as you mentioned, he expects, meaning he is expecting to get the call up and to get the net from both those gentlemen, which means one of those guys has to get either sent to the minors or put on waivers. And from what I'm hearing is that it would be Swayman because he is waivers exempt. So he would be able to essentially be kept within the organization without being exposed to the waiver wire. So I don't know. That's not a great situation to be in, no matter how you look at it. Of course, we wish Tuukka Rask the best, and we don't ever want to say you wish bad things upon a player. But then again, you have to earn your spot. And, for Tuukka Rask, he contemplated retirement last year. The injuries, he's been dealing with those the last couple of seasons. So he hasn't been 100% healthy. So this is a tricky situation. It's not as clean, not as clean as you may think. So we'll have to see how the Boston Bruins management handles this, because this is not an easy way to go, no matter how you slice it.
Well, certainly it's going to depend, obviously, how Tuukka Rask looks, in his game for Providence, too. But the thing that's challenging, too, is out of the two goaltenders that have played, I think Jeremy Swayman at times has really been the better goaltender, too. So, interesting. Speaking of injury news, though, we do have one injury. Basically, it's the New Jersey Devils is what we're going to talk about here. A huge blow for them. Their prize offseason acquisition defenseman, Dougie Hamilton, he's on injured reserve after breaking his jaw. He underwent surgery, I believe, on Wednesday. He got hit in the face with a deflected puck a week ago against the Washington Capitals. So not a fun little ride there. Obviously, those are pretty nasty. 28 years old. He has 20 points in 30 games, leading all Devils defensemen. So he's going to be really missed in New Jersey. Of course, no timetable for his return. Those things are usually pretty messy. The Devils right now, they're without Jonathan Bernier in net for the rest of the season after he underwent successful hip surgery. They're currently missing Nico Hischier, Pavel Zacha, and Igor Sharangovich. But they did get Thomas Tatar back Tuesday. So we'll have to see and keep an eye as the NHL continues. Episode 94. Welcome in, folks. Nick Maxon is joining me. Nick, I didn't know how directions worked last week. It's fine. It's whatever. But
it would be the worst thing you've done. So
yeah. I flipped us, at least in our view, on we're using a new recording process, and I don't know if it didn't flip us over in the episode or not, but anyway, I couldn't figure out directions, or maybe it was a recording thing, but it wasn't good. So I don't know what side of the YouTube stream you're on today, but you're with us, and we're happy to have you with us. Of course, it's about 11:13 in the morning on Saturday. We're having a much earlier recording time than we ever had anticipated this week. This episode was supposed to come out on Tuesday. And part of the fun of that is, Nick, at 12 o'clock, near the kind of tail end of the show, we're going to have a live trivia winner for maybe the only time in show history, just because of when that goes out. So if you hear frantic typing and keyboards around the end of this episode, that's why. And we'll keep you updated as to who hopefully figures out some trivia here. The trivia question actually has something to do with some Olympic pieces here. But before we get to that, and before how that relates to St. Cloud State, Nick, you've got a free day off, technically, just because of the men's and women's teams. Yeah, kind of ish. Are you doing anything?
And then you drug me back into this when we normally record on Sunday mornings, and then all of a sudden my phone blows up. Hey, do you want to do it Saturday in the middle of the day? I'm like, no. That's
coming from the guy who doesn't have to edit the show after. So you shut up over there.
You're right, but it's also the guy that had things not been canceled, I wouldn't be here right now. So.
Okay, well, first of all, where would you be, and where will both you and I be this afternoon? Not in the same place, obviously, but technically in the same location in our respective places, if that makes sense.
I'll be on the ice rink. It's been a little bit too cold to go out to the outdoor rinks. Again, just with the schedules and everything, it's hard to get into some of those, either the hockey finders or even some of the local rinks that have like the organized, free hockey kind of stuff. It's just been very, very difficult to find the schedule that works. So outdoor rinks, now that they're here, are my best option. And so after our recording here, I'll be able to go out and finally get back on the ice. I've been dying to do it. And plus, I need to get back to working out. It's not been good. So
yeah, hockey's a great workout for that. Obviously, I'm very thankful every day that I don't have a massive back injury or something like that. Knock on wood and stuff. But thankful to be able to play that. And if you're ever looking for a sport, if you have 3 other people and you want a sport that's fun that will keep you in shape, doubles racquetball. we used to play doubles racquetball. And if you play a best of 3 series, just the way the scoring works, if you're with 3 other people who are like semi-coordinated and can keep it as a good game, oh yeah, you'll be there for 2 hours. I mean, it's awesome.
Even more so. Have you ever heard of volleyball?
Volleyball. I haven't heard of volleyball. I was waiting for you to go to pickleball, and I'm like, that's a bit slower, but okay.
Yeah, no. Volleyball is volleyball in a racquetball court, and
God.
all the walls and the ceilings are in play. So it used to be. So when I was at Iowa State, this was a huge once they opened up, because it was an intramural league that they did this on, it filled up within like 10 minutes.
Now we know what they do with now we know what they do in Iowa, but
yeah, volleyball is huge out there. We used to have right east of the Jack Trice Stadium, the football stadium, there used to be rows and rows of beach volleyball. So fall and the spring, they would have beach volleyball leagues. I love sand volleyball. It's one of my favorite summertime sports. It's hard. But I love it because, I'll lay out my body. I'm diving, I'm trying to do whatever I can to keep the ball in play. I love that ability to just lay your body out and, do whatever you can to keep it in play. But for volleyball, because you had the low ceiling and then you had the walls. And again, same rules. So you can still hit it 3 times. The only thing that it's out essentially is if it hits the ground. So even that back wall of the glass, that's still in play. So you can't go over. I think the only thing is you have to serve it without hitting the back wall or the side walls. I think that's the only slight kind of rule. But everything else, you could go, bounce or whatever. It's really, really fun. So if folks are out there looking for something different, if somebody offers it, give that a shot. That's a lot of fun.
How does that work? Does the net come unlinked, or is the net always in there and you just duck underneath it? And
so in other words, it's just little eye screws. So they just hook it up to the wall. So there's no pull. So there's nothing that you can run into or whatnot. And then you can just take it down. It's just a couple of hooks and it's really easy to do it. So it's really, really easy to do it. So.
Yeah, that's kind of smart. I mean, I go back, speaking of playing hockey, I miss the days where it was we could go skate in the morning and then in the afternoon we work out for an hour and then go play racquetball for 2 hours. It's between hockey and doing all that, we were working out for 6 hours. And then I was like, why am I losing weight? Well, probably because I ate 5,000 calories and burned about 8,000. So that might be why. And then I did it all over again every day. So the belly is definitely not the same, but I think we're doing all right. I get on the ice probably 3 to 4 times a week, and that's helpful. It's very helpful, especially when you're playing with good hockey players. And that's a good lesson for young guys too, is, if you get a chance to, if you're a Pee Wee age player and you can go out for a Bantam age session or a high school session, take that opportunity if they'll let you come out, because obviously be respectful, but, playing with good hockey players just makes you work harder and makes you refine the things to get better in your game as well too. Someone who knows that very well, Nick, what a great opportunity in St. Cloud State hockey. This is our only St. Cloud related college hockey news, and that's Brett Larson heading to the Olympics with Penguins head coach Mike Sullivan. What an exciting time for him to get an opportunity like this. You've gotten a chance to kind of sit with him personally. Obviously, there's some excitement. There's a little bit of nerves based on the state of the world. What have you kind of gathered from Brett in this opportunity?
So when we learned of it on Tuesday, now mind you, we weren't allowed to make the announcement public until USA Hockey did. But I sat down with Brett as we were in preparation for this weekend's game. Again, Husky Productions. Tuesdays are our basically pre-record day. We spend basically from 8:30 to 9 o'clock in the morning, all the way to about 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, recording interviews, getting stuff on tape, trying to prep for the weekend's broadcast. So mind you, it would have been 4 games we were doing this weekend. We had both the women's games on the docket, including what was today supposed to be. It was supposed to be picked up by Bally Sports North as well. So that was going to be a nice exposure to us. But sitting down with him, he's obviously really excited. And then before Hockey and Chill, which I've done the last couple of weeks because our friend Joey Erickson has been seeing family down in the Texas area where he's from. So, again, good opportunity for him to go down and relax a little bit. But I asked him very candidly, because you could see it too with Brett, that he was very excited. And I just simply asked him, aren't you a little bit nervous? And he immediately goes, I'm very nervous. That I asked, what's the plan? And he goes, there's a plan in place. We could be able to get, I think it's an emergency waiver, essentially to bring RJ Ingram, their video coach, on to be away from the press box as the video coach into basically on the bench. So there is a plan in place in case he is stuck in a quarantine type situation. And then also too, at the end of it, we asked him, would you ever envision this, a few years ago? He's like, no. But he's super excited to represent his country. He's certainly earned it. I think everybody in Husky Nation, and of course, I think around the college hockey world, can see what he's done with this program. He's elevated it. I think before he came on board with Bob Mosko, there was some concern. As always with any transition, do we stay, do we drop, or does he elevate it? He's gotten this program better. And so he's absolutely deserving of it. Of course, Mike Hastings with Mankato also on that list. And then a preliminary list, Noah, not to switch gears here real quick, but some of the players, again, it's a very NCAA heavy preliminary invite that was sent out by USA Hockey. And then not officially, but some eyes to watch. Maybe Sam Henches gets the call as well. Not quite sure. And again, it's an invite, so he would have to accept it. And as much as I would love for him to get that opportunity, it would kind of stink for the Huskies, because when he's in the lineup, he's sort of, we talked about this last week, he just sort of evens the lines. It kind of puts everybody in the right spot, if you want to say, in the top 9 for forwards. But, again, if you have opportunity to play in the Olympics, I don't know how you say no to that.
Right.
But again, it would be up to his decision if he gets the call.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see how that works. Like you mentioned, the quarantine period for those guys, is like 4 to 5 weeks potentially. So
if you test positive, yes.
Yeah.
So and I think we have to make sure we clarify that. So at least from China, again, a big reason why the NHL pulled out was because of the quarantine period. I think it's officially 25 to 45 days, if I recall correctly. So somewhere in the midst of 3 to 5 weeks. And yeah, I mean, that doesn't sound fun. And at the end of it, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. You just as we saw this weekend, no matter how many things you can do to prep yourself, COVID is raging right now. So we'll have to see, for the players who are in, how many accept, and just have to go from there. And it's just part of the gig. So if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, then good. So, but what can you do?
And definitely, the piece too, I think, and Brett knows this as well, as nervous as Brett is about that too, he'd be even more nervous about it, if he somehow did have something not go particularly right in that area coming back and, affecting the Husky season, because they're going to start to push into that crucial point of the year too. In the piece too about, bringing a video coach down. I mean, you look down, Nick Oliver, Dave Shack, they've got it. They've got the boat under control for sure. And the Huskies will be good. And it should be exciting. Why don't we take a quick look around the college hockey world this past week, though? Like we mentioned, the Huskies were off, both men's and women's. So kind of the big one here. Let's start on Friday. Minnesota handling Michigan State, and Notre Dame beating Penn State. That was a pretty good hockey game there by a score of 4-2. That was a
good one. Yes.
So to throw that one out there, let's go to the NCHC action. It was actually Colorado College walking over Miami by a score of 5-1.
5-1.
Yeah, really good win for them in that. And that was kind of
CC, not to interrupt you, Noah, but CC, they're scoring more this year under first-year head coach Chris Mayotte. They're already making improvements. Now, do they have the depth of talent, to maybe make an NCIC push? Not this year, but you can definitely tell that they're playing a much more offensive style of game. They've got a couple of guys, even from Minnesota. Matt Gleason was a guy that I watched. He was on the same ice with Jack Peart in the basically the high school all-star prospects games that I called back in November of 2019. Gleason was the MVP of that hockey game, got a chance to meet his parents. Great family, great kid. And man, that kid can shoot the puck, and he can stick handle on a phone booth. So they got some good guys going into that program. And sort of like St. Thomas, give CC a year or two more under this current leadership, and they might make some noise. Don't count CC out too early, and they may even make life a little bit more tough for a lot of teams coming on the NCAA wire here towards the playoffs too. So don't count them out just yet.
Yeah. Speaking of teams that we saw recently, Bemidji State walking over Lake Superior State by a score of 5-1, a great response game for them. In fact, as I pull up the box score, I think it was Lucas Sillinger who had 2 goals and just 2 goals. And Owen Sillinger scored as well too. So a pretty impressive performance from that group. Minnesota State vindicating their
7-1.
Yeah, their Ferris State Demons there.
Wyatt Amat with a hat trick.
Yeah, the other 7-1 score was Boston University over number 28 Arizona State. That was kind of surprising to me, a little bit of that bounce, but ASU on the road there, so maybe plays into the piece. But I think the one everyone has paid attention to, of course, we're recording this Saturday afternoon, so we've only got the Friday scores. That's up at Ralph Engelstad Arena in North Dakota. Number 8 versus 18.
Oh, boy.
It was Cornell with a 3-goal third period for a 4-3 victory. I think it was 3 goals in the span of about 5 minutes. Yeah, 9:26 to 14:11. So just under 5 minutes for Cornell to take that victory. 2 power play goals in the game, 1 on each side. North Dakota, of course, I got to watch some of the replays against that U.S. under-18 team that they lost 2-0 to as well. And I not that we want to talk about North Dakota too much, but obviously they're in the NCHC. I mean, they haven't played bad. I mean, it hasn't been, where they played poorly. It just it feels like a weird trend. It almost feels like it's little bit
between their ears.
Yeah.
Honestly.
And it almost feels like a little bit kind of how the Huskies went through that stretch where they should have beat Omaha that Saturday night. And then they went into Western Michigan and kind of just didn't have things firing on all cylinders right there. Obviously they could respond tonight and win 7-1, but I mean, right. It's interesting.
It's, it goes down to what I think we look at North Dakota this year. They're talented, but they're young, right? It's the same thing with Michigan. It's the same thing with Minnesota, where I think Minnesota's a little bit more emotionally mature as a hockey team than, say, North Dakota is. Because we know the talent's there for North Dakota. You can never count out North Dakota. I mean, after they got absolutely trounced by the Huskies 8-2, they came back and won the next game. So it's been consistency for them all year long. So in hindsight, if Friday they got their doors blown off, or in this case, gave up a 3-1 lead in the third period, that means Saturday, if the script continues, they will rebound and have this. And that's been the problem all season long with Brad Berry's squad is, how can we piece these wins together, and how can we keep playing at a consistent level? And to your point, I think it's just a learning curve. It's a younger team. And just like how I believe the Gophers, Michigan, if they retain most of their players, and North Dakota next year, they will make strides because again, the talent's there. But again, you have to learn how to win in college hockey at every level. These teams just haven't quite gotten that just yet. Again, a lot of that due to just the youth on their squads.
Yeah, interesting, and we'll keep an eye on it moving forward. But why don't we switch on over here? We're about 25 minutes in the show, so why don't we switch over to some Minnesota Wild talk here? Of course, their recent victory against the Boston Bruins, a 3-2 score. Before that, losing in the Winter Classic. We touched on that last week. Then they're off for a week, which is probably really helpful with the injury piece as well, too. Why don't we start with the injury piece? Let's start with the big one here. Karil Kaprizzov, they're saying that they're going to try to get him on the ice next week, and hopefully he might be ready to go by next Friday. You know what? Honestly, I don't know with these things. Really, I don't. And I say that honestly. I'm about to give you a hot take here, by the way. So buckle up your seatbelt. But I really don't know about these things because my thought is this: there is a big difference between someone who has dislocated their shoulder versus someone who has fractured a collarbone. And I think that if Kaprizov was at that point where it was serious enough, I don't know that they would play this close to the chest. I know it's the NHL, but I think if he had broken his collarbone or something big where it was he's going to be out long term, I think Dean Evason would be a little more flat out with it. So I think that even if he doesn't return next Friday or the following Monday on the 17th, I think he's still maybe a week and a half away. I don't think he's that far away. So that tells me that it's something that hopefully can be remedied in the next 2 weeks. That's kind of where I'm going. But I mean, your thoughts on that before we get to your part.
Well, it's gamesmanship either way you look at it. It's your best player. It's your best player. So even if, and it's partially, I think, again, we're not that far removed from the injury, less than 48 hours. So it could be where they're still undergoing tests. And again, when you have your best player, you're definitely not going to announce to the world that it's a shoulder or a collarbone, because then all of a sudden, how it goes in hockey. There's a target on your back. But to me, I still think it go either way. I'm with you on that. I still think there's a potential that maybe it isn't as serious as it, but here's the thing. Kaprizov's a tough kid. As much as, he's skilled and he brings so much offensive pressure to the opposing defense where he goes after, he holds on his skates really, really well. He's not a pushover type kid. So when he went down and when he draped his right shoulder down, granted, I'm not a doctor by any means, but when he goes off and doesn't return, that was a little bit okay. This is not something small.
So that begs the question. I mean, he's a tough kid, but let's say he dislocated his shoulder or something like that, and knowing how those things work, right? If you're Dean Evason, like you mentioned, we're less than 48 hours removed from the injury. The Wild played tonight, and then they're off for a week. is it something that maybe just might come down to that precautionary piece where they say, you know what, you're at about 80%. We don't want you hurting yourself. Let's give you a week. Let's give you some time and see if you're kind of ready to go and healed up by next Friday.
Well, I think so, because obviously for a kid of his caliber, right, you know, you want him as close to 100% as you possibly can, right? The other part of it is you don't want him to go out there. I mean, granted, at this time of year, I mean, look at all of him. We'll obviously discuss all the other injuries here in a second, but there's a number that this team is going through, right? At this time of the year, every team is playing through injuries no matter what, right? That's just kind of how this thing happens, but you try to minimize it as best you can. And once your best player, you need him as close to 100% as possible, even more so. You don't want to put him out in a position where, whether it's a dislocated shoulder or something else, right? You don't want him to be put in a position where that can be not only re-injured per se or made worse, right? Because then you're out more long-term than that. So like I mentioned before, it wouldn't surprise me if they just say, hey, you know, he could play. And again, I think that's more just gamesmanship on the lines than anything. I think at some point, if they are doing x-rays or something like that, where it comes to something more long-term, you know, it'll still be very vague. They would announce it at that point. So, but I still think that they're playing it close to justice because of the name, not necessarily the injury.
Yeah, so let's kind of talk about those injuries real quick before we circle back to the Kaprizzov, our thoughts on that play here. I didn't know this. If this is true, Nick Bjugstad missing approximately 6 weeks with a hand injury,
yes.
Slashed so hard in practice that he actually made like noise. I mean, that's scary.
Matt Zuccarello too was the guy in practice. In fact, according to Russo, he was essentially chasing him down the tunnel because I think, you know, and that's the thing, when you get to the pro level, even on your own team, these practices are competitive, right? These, you know,
especially when the Wild have not played hardly at all in the last 16 days. So
right, there's a lot of pent up energy and emotion, right? But you know, there, especially in your own team, there's sort of no-nos, right? And a big no-no is, you know, keep the stick down. You don't want to be slashing, you know, close to the hands. And I'm sure, knowing Zuccarello, that it wasn't intentional by any means, but and maybe it was like one of those quirky plays where he meant to grab the stick, there was a quick turn, and maybe it was just a timing type thing. But from what it sounds like, if you're out 6 weeks, that's either a fracture, or that's at least, or a broken kind of wrist kind of thing. Now, again, that's nothing official from the team. But if you're out that long, and you hear something, mind you, I've had my wrist broken twice on my left wrist and once on my right. When I broke it the first time, I heard it, and you feel it. You know instantly something's wrong. So if he went immediately down the tunnel like it was reported, that tells me something pretty major happened to his wrist/hand.
Yeah, and fortunately, but unfortunately, Nick Bjugstad not having the greatest of seasons. So, I mean, I guess that's not to say it should happen to anybody, but the Wild are not losing a piece that has been all that productive this season, which you hope that he comes back and he's able to kind of jump back into a rhythm here, because I think he's been okay in a Minnesota Wild sweater. I don't think he's been amazing, but nice to see the Minnesota kid.
Piece.
Yeah, nice.
He's a depth piece. We talked about that before the season last year, the end of it, I should say, and that if you can get him on a cheap deal, he's a good depth piece. He has size. That's the thing. He's a big kid. In the playoffs, that could mean quite a bit just for the size. Now, I don't necessarily need him to contribute, but if you can go down on the fourth line and, you know, provide, you know, a good cycle and hang on to the puck in the offensive zone, then you're getting paid for what you're supposed to do. So I hope he comes back soon, and we'll just have to watch to see his injury progress. Yeah,
and speaking of size and a little bit maybe closer return, Jordan Greenway and Brandon Duhaime still on the NHL's COVID list. Joel Eriksson-Ek still missing from that injury on December 20th against the Stars. Jared Spurgeon hasn't played since December 16th. He's hopefully inching to a return. Cam Talbot is reportedly supposed to skate starting next week. And then Jonas Brodin, we heard this one this morning too, is kind of going to be shelved for at least a week, if not more. So when you say a week, if not more, it kind of bodes closer to maybe 2 weeks potentially, but you never know with those things as well too. But Trent Frederic, what does that name mean to Minnesota Wild fans? Let's talk
enemy number one.
Yeah, let's talk about the Kaprizov injury. And you know, I want to throw this out here right now, and I was one of the first ones to say that, you know, was it a boarding call? Yeah, absolutely. I got to be honest, Nick. I am in the minority camp. I am in the minority camp that says that this was not a targeting play. And when
I'm with you with that too.
And when I say not a targeting play, here's what I mean by that. Because people say that because Trent Frederic is a hard-nosed hockey player that he's targeting Kaprizov. One, kind of his job. First of all, let's put that out there.
He's getting paid to do what he did.
He's getting paid to hit people. That's kind of his job. But I want to throw this out there too for Minnesota Wild fans too. I actually went and I clipped the actual full speed clip of the game, and I wanted to see how long it took when Kaprizov turned his body and finally gave up possession of the puck. So when Kaprizov turned his body, he was actually facing Frederic right when he turned the puck over. So he was actually facing directly at him. And then within that span of time, then he fell and Frederic closed in and, of course, hit him. I want to put this out there for you, Nick. That took 520 milliseconds. To put that in perspective, it takes 400 milliseconds. Can you do something for me, Nick? Can you blink for me? Just blink.
I did.
Yeah.
You missed it. It was that quick.
Exactly. It's 400 milliseconds it takes to blink, and that play took 520 milliseconds to get to that point. And I want to ask Minnesota Wild fans an honest question. If it wasn't Karil Kaprizzov or something like that, would this be that big of an uproar? Was it a boarding call based on the way the play ended up and Kaprizov was in a really crappy spot? Yeah, sure. Yeah. But I did not see it as a targeting play. I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, right. And I didn't see it as a play that the NHL Department of Player Safety would get involved in. Yeah. And again, you make the argument right on the head. It's about your star player. It's about, what this Wild team was when it was without him. What he brings. You want. And again, what Karil Kaprizzov has done to this fan base, he's made this team watch TV. He really has. And at the end of it, the fans' engagement level in terms of this team has a chance to win every night when he's in the lineup is there, right? This team has gotten to where it has as quickly as it has because he's been in the lineup. So going back to the play breakdown, right? So it's the targeting aspect, right? So was Kaprizov always facing the boards the whole time? No, he was not. What makes this play interesting, and we had this discussion too a couple of years back with the Pavelski injury, which led to the 4-goal absolute demise of the Vegas Golden Knights in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup first-round playoffs, which, mind you, that was insane to watch. Right. But it was like, was that a 5-minute major, that kind of thing? Again, it's a judgment call. It's an awkward play because he kind of loses his balance because he was being checked by another Boston player at the time as well. Yeah.
I thought the call was perfect. 2-minute board. Yeah. Totally kosher with that. And like you're saying, Nick, I don't think either of us, when I watched that, my first reaction was not, oh my God, Trent Frederic, how could you make a play like that? My first thought was, oh, that doesn't look good for Kaprizov. Honestly, the hit by Kevin Fiala against Nicholas Roy against LA last year was worse. It was worse. 100%. And there was no malicious intent in that one.
No. And let's define malicious intent, right? That's subjective just as much as anything, right? You're looking at a play and saying, oh, he intended to hit him like that, right? Mind you, let's define intent. Did Frederic intend to hit Kaprizov 100%, right?
But he's not Rafi Torres.
No. And he kind of got him, honestly, kind of in the shoulder area to me. It wasn't directly in the numbers. And again, just the way that he was falling, the way that Kaprizov was off balance, and just the way that he went into the boards, was the reason why he got injured. Again, it wasn't like he saw numbers the whole way. It was, and that's the thing in hockey too.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can we talk about that? Because I think the other piece that the casual fan goes back to, and I don't know that what we are, but I know that we're not casual fans, and we've seen that play, unfortunately enough, unfold in various ways where numbers get turned and people get hit from behind in various ways, shapes, and sizes, whatever. Nick, I want to ask you this for the fans. Just because a hit looks bad, does that mean the hit was bad?
No. And I think that's the key, right? So, in fact, I'm actually pulling the hit up as we speak right now. Just because I think it's important for me to remind myself. So he turns, and honestly, again, he doesn't get him straight in the numbers. Kaprizov does turn to do kind of a button hook, and he kind of gets some shoulder slash back. So a boarding call, yeah, but was it a malicious hit where he's coming in directly perpendicular to the boards, where he sees numbers the whole way, he still finishes his check? No. It's unfortunate. That's the thing. It's possible and we had a discussion years back with the Keith Ballard / Matt Martin incident, right? When Keith Ballard's at the red line and he goes to dump the puck in, and you're taught this as a hockey player. You don't turn towards the boards. And what Keith Ballard did in this play was he saw Matt Martin coming across the ice. He dumps it, and then instead of just leaning in with his shoulder to use the boards or use the glass as sort of, your cushion. He ends up trying to get out of the way, but he turns towards the boards and he ends up, exposing his back, and Martin finishes a check. Now, people were pissed off about Matt Martin. I'm like, no, that's on Keith Ballard there. He's the one that at the very last second turned his back to Matt Martin. And, had he not done that, it's a clean check and they both probably skate away and it's probably okay.
So now I'll throw this because I have it pulled up too. And of course, watching it in full speed, and Frederic goes probably about 5 feet in the span of 500 milliseconds. So that kind of tells you how fast he was going. But the only thing I think I will give the fans on this, and granted, like you said, it happens so fast. The puck does pop free right as Frederic gets to the plate. The only thing that I think I would maybe give them is that maybe you can pick up the puck and step through. But again, Trent Frederic,
he's committed to the hit.
Yeah, and the way that he plays, there is a difference. If you are a bottom six forward, your job is to set the tone and kind of do those things. And you're not necessarily concerned in that moment about picking up the puck, dragging through 3 guys and putting a puck on net there. You're thinking, okay, I want to separate the man from the puck. And the best way for me to do that is to finish this play. And
on top of that, Kaprizov is known to be a guy that's hard to get off the puck, right? And and again, the timing when the puck pops out to when he hits him, it's not that much time. I mean, again, the call was boarding. It wasn't interference, which to me would tell that the referees thought that it was a late hit or a hit that was like a player that wasn't deemed to be eligible to be checked, right? And that's key, because if it's an interference call, then it's like, okay, now we're talking about maybe player safety getting involved because this is a player that's ineligible, or I should say ineligible to be checked, right? So they felt he was fine to be checked, but the way he hit him was not great. And again, fast moving play, things are turning and things are happening. Again, it wasn't directly from the back. It's an unfortunate hit, but to me, again, I think it's the right call not to have supplemental discipline in this situation.
That's what it comes down to, right? It was just an awkward turn of events. I mean, like I said, I had a teammate my senior year of high school who he broke his back, and we hit him harder in practice than the way he got hit when he broke his back. But it was just an awkward entry, the way that he lost his balance when he got bumped and stuff. I mean, it was literally I could stand there and push you harder with one arm than the way he got hit, but it was just where his body was at that particular moment. And you know what? If that hit happens and they call it a boarding call and Kaprizov gets up and plays the rest of the hockey game, are we having this discussion again too? I really want to go. I really think it's important to go back to that and say, if this isn't Kaprizov and if he doesn't exit the game, are we talking about this?
We are to a degree, but not to as much or in depth as we are.
Yeah, those are the lines that go into hockey plays like this. But whatever, I know that probably 98% of the people that are listening to this, if they haven't shut it off already, are freaking out about it too. And that's whatever. You're entitled to have your opinion, but that's from our perspective, I guess that's kind of our thoughts too. We're at just over 40 minutes on the show. I do want to touch on one more piece. The Minnesota Wild obviously going to have to respond with the injury decimations. I thought Connor Dewar has looked good and made some really nice plays too. Brandon Duhaime coming back will be really nice as we move forward. But a couple guys, Marco Rossi, Matt Boldy, their first NHL game. Matt Boldy getting a goal from Marcus Foligno on an assist there. Good little give and go.
That was pretty.
Yeah, and they were actually on a line with Foligno through most of the night and actually got a lot of special teams looks and some looks late in that game in a 1-goal hockey game as well, too, with the injury, of course, to Kaprizov only carrying 10 forwards now in that game as well. Nick, let's start Marco Rossi. What did you think his first performance against Boston?
But he played all right, and again, the comparison between Boldy and Rossi is a little unfair because you're talking about a center versus a wing, and there's different responsibilities for both of them. And therefore, also that means, depending on the system, obviously, you may be limited in how much offense you want to be involved in. And of course, as young players, for a coach, you're telling them, you're not here to be savior, right? You're here to just play your game, just keep it simple, and to get yourself. I will say this, though, Marco Rossi, I thought he played all right.
I did too.
Face-off dots, obviously against some really good talent. He did all right. I don't remember his numbers, but it wasn't fantastic. But again, it's trial by fire. And again, I thought he handled it all right. But holy cow, Matt Boldy. And I think ESPN, I know we're going to talk about broadcasting here in a little bit, but I think they said the word perfect. He looked very comfortable out there. Even on the special teams, he was making really good, smart plays, which is important. It looked like he was like, this is no different than being in Iowa. And that is the type of mentality you want to see in a young player. That's an emotionally mature player who's there, who's not looking at it as a jump from one to the other. It's like, hey, I'm just going to play my game. And, just if the bounces come, they come. And he ends up getting his first goal in front of his family and the barn that he grew up less than a few miles away from, and gets the game-winning goal too. So at that, Matt Boldy looked great. Rossi looked okay. So, but nonetheless, I mean, both didn't look bad. And for the Minnesota Wild, when you got two rookies coming, and granted they're high-level picks, but still, this is the ultimate litmus test. Is how do they, transpire into the NHL? And so far, not bad.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think Marco Rossi, you can tell I don't want to say he's undersized, but he's playing with the big boys now. And I think that was the one piece that people kind of wanted to key in on. He was still in those dirty areas though. I mean, he was able to engage. I think once he figures out, there's two ways that little guys survive in the NHL. And that's either by figuring out how to get stronger and be able to kind of fend off players, or being able to use and anticipate and be able to slow the game down and control it and use their skills to their advantage, right? We see those kind of things. I think Marco Rossi fits in that second category where he is going to get a bit stronger, but I think he's going to rely on his hockey IQ a little bit. It's similar to how he did in juniors. And then once he's able to slow the game down in his head, he'll take control of the hockey game. So it's going to just take some time for him. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he jumps in. You mentioned faceoff percentage, 33% on the faceoff dot. Not great, but small sample size. 2 shots on goal for him, 4 shots on goal for Matt Boldy. So 6 shots combined between the two rookies, a goal for Matt Boldy, obviously. So those are things that are important to kind of key in on. Let's take a look too. Matt Boldy, 6'2", 201 pounds, 20 years old for him. And Marco Rossi, 5'9", 182, and they're both 20 years of age. So a little bit of a different style of play in what we're going to see. And I think that's good for the Minnesota Wild to have guys that do either of those things. I mean, a similar player for Marco Rossi comparison, although he plays wing, maybe Matt Zuccarello and the shiftiness aspect and that sort of thing. That might be a good comparison for Wild fans to kind of think on. He's a little bit more of a playmaker than a goal scorer, I think, Marco Rossi, if we're being honest with ourselves. But yeah, I thought they both looked impressive. Matt Boldy's give and go. Calm, cool, and composed. And I don't know that they both look particularly great in the first 10 to 15 minutes of that hockey game, but I don't think the Minnesota Wild looked great to start that game. And I think they started to heat up and warm up. So it'd be interesting to see. Of course, we're recording this Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning. So it'll be important to see how they're going to respond in the lineup against Washington.
And, back to your small player thing. I mean, that was kind of how I, kind of, approach the game too. Was, I didn't mind being the guy that got in there and got tossed around. And in fact, in front of the net, I was the guy that loved to be in front, tip pucks, and to just be a body there. And, there's some chirping that happens there. I'll leave those conversations on the ice. But, my favorite player to watch as growing up was actually Daniel Briere. For a guy of his size, because you talk about a guy that could buy his own time and buy his own space. Granted, I liked him more when he was with Buffalo. Anybody that dresses up in a Philly uniform, I tend to, just what are you doing? But seriously though, he had a great shot. Again, very high hockey IQ. I think he's a GM in the OHL somewhere too.
He's actually in the running. He interviewed along with I forget who else it was for the Canadians general manager job. So
he's a smart guy.
I don't know why I can't think of who the other one is. It's a very well-known name, so let me look that up. But yes, small guys, you guys aren't bad. I got to be honest, as someone who's 6'4", the worst thing ever is when a little guy comes in with speed and he gets underneath you and like the shoulders are down near where your knees are, and you're like, how the hell am I supposed to? What am I supposed to do here? I can't hit you. I can't cross check you. You're down there and I'm up here and I can't do anything about that. Like, that's just not.
Yeah. And Briere wasn't he wasn't the lean in type player, but he was the guy that he could make himself disappear, then reappear. Right. He was the guy that was always sort of finding those soft areas. And more so when he was ready for a one-timer. Man, his shot was absolutely insane. He was a power play specialist too with Philadelphia and for Buffalo when he was with both those clubs respectively. And absolutely dangerous in the shootout too. He had some pretty good mitts. They're going in one-on-one with the goaltender. So, as you mentioned, Matt Zuccarello and even Danny Briere, if you watch some tape on how Briere looked on, granted, the NHL is a little bit different the way that he was playing, but I think you could still learn some things talking about Marco Rossi again from some of those NHL vets.
Yeah. By the way, the other GM candidate that was in the mix is Roberto Luongo.
That's right. Yes.
For the GM mix for the Canadians. So it'll be interesting to see where they go on that one. Nick, is there anything else you wanted to add about college hockey, the Minnesota Wild? Anything else before we head on over? Yeah. Okay.
There
all right.
is.
What do you got?
So there's a lot of cause of concern right now in the college hockey world. There's the season series are getting postponed, and looking at the schedule again, the question is, if we're talking specifically Huskies Bulldogs on the men's side, there's not a sort of a same weekend off. So I did reach out to the NCHC. I did get an initial reply from Josh Fenton and also Michael Westman, who's the associate commissioner of the NCHC. I haven't received some answers to questions as of yet, but from what I hear around the rinks is that there is some schedule adjustments coming. And that, one of those schedule adjustments may mean pushing the NCHC Frozen Face-Off back a week. We don't know for sure, but and I did ask the question, is there cause of concern for this to escalate? So there's some things that I did press them on, because essentially, as you and I both know, Noah, they did not really, schedule in, like last year where there was some weekends that had some flexibility to reschedule or move things around. They didn't do that this year. So they're going to have to get creative with some scheduling. Again, some of the things I'm hearing, maybe middle of the week type stuff, or possibly double headers to make some things up if they play teams again. Again, we haven't heard anything official. I'm still waiting on that. So once I do hear back from the NCC, I'll be sure to let fans know what they are looking at as far as trying to make up some of these games and maybe potential procedural wise, what they plan to do to try to, lessen the impact on the regular season as we head to the second half.
Yeah, the thing that I'm kind of looking at too, and I don't know that it's the greatest thing. I mean, March 4th and 5th, the Huskies play Duluth, and then that Friday, March 11th, that's when the quarterfinals, the best of three series starts, and then the week after, March 18th, is when the Frozen Face-Off is, and then the 25th is the regionals. So they don't actually have a week to play in, and that makes me wonder, do we see something similar like last year where you actually don't have your best of three series and you go back to the format that they had last year? I think that's the only weekend that you can pull is
probably
the best of three weekend. So that's something we'll keep our eye on, as well as we mentioned the Huskies, of course, trying to find that extra matchup against Minnesota Duluth. They've got Denver on the docket, followed by Miami of Ohio, North Dakota to finish out the month of January, Western Michigan, Nebraska, Omaha, Colorado College, and Minnesota Duluth to finish out the regular season. So they'll have Duluth twice in somewhere in there. So they'll see a lot of the Bulldogs at the tail end of the regular season. But that will do it for the main part of the show. And we're going to head on to our extra ice session. We're going to have, of course, a live trivia winner, and we're also going to talk a little bit about some broadcasting news. Welcome into the Extra Ice Session, episode 94. Nick Maxon, somewhere on your screen. I'm also on your screen. I'm Noah Grant. We're happy to have you here on this Saturday morning. Boy, it's been a while since we've said something like that. But nonetheless, we're going to have a live trivia winner in about 7 to 8 minutes or so. That's kind of when the question comes out. It's 11:53 here, so we'll have to see how that goes. But until we hit that point, Nick, I kind of wanted to get your impression. I know a lot of fans were talking about the broadcast on Thursday when the Wild went up and they played Boston in Boston and the ESPN broadcast. And, I always think it's interesting. I know that there's a lot of not so great broadcasts and broadcasters out there. Some of those things relate to the personnel. Some of those things relate to the technical opportunities that are provided to the group. I mean, if you're a one-man or a two-man crew, those things make a big difference, right?
Huge.
I gotta ask, when fans talk about, because it seems like nobody can get a consensus on who they like in terms of broadcast. I mean, is there really are there broadcasting crews that like are perfect or go-to examples, in the NHL in your mind? I think just historically there might be, but it seems like people just cannot pin down what they like or don't like about certain broadcasts. And I got to be honest, Nick, from our point of view, and especially your point of view, I don't know that people understand how difficult it is to put all those pieces together, especially in a TV broadcast. I mean, I kind of want to open up that discussion, but
I think it more goes to the personalities. And again, it's subjective, right?
Yeah.
So there's going to be people that love me. There's going to be people that hate me. There's people that do both. Hashtag Caleb Peabody. So, and also Noah Grant. So, I think at the end of the day, the NHL let's start there, right? So ESPN, there's no question the NHL needed to get back to ESPN. There is absolutely no question. If you want this league to continue to grow, get the necessary revenue that they need to get out of this basically flat cap, they needed to have a cash injection. They also need more fans to get involved, right? So, and part of that, and part of the strategy with ESPN is, do they have the so-called traditional hockey commentators? No. What they essentially are doing is bridging the gap between what maybe the football, the basketball, maybe even the baseball fans would see, and now those people are calling hockey games. Now, you and I both know this, Noah, probably better than most, but when you call a football game, a baseball game, or a basketball game, there's some downtime to those. Hockey is incredibly fast. It moves very fast. And unless you've played the game, or at least you've broadcasted enough times where you kind of know what to anticipate, it's not an easy game to call. What's funny is, on my end of it, it's actually harder for me to call baseball than it is for hockey, just because, again, I know the sport very well. For hockey, I can anticipate it. I'm expecting constant action, whereas with baseball, and I think Dick Bramer, a former St. Louis State alum, just is so smooth on this. He has story after story after stats. All the downtime he utilizes so much. To me, that's almost harder. Yeah. But I can also understand if you're not used to the speed and not used to how quickly things can develop and change, especially in transition hockey, right? It can kind of throw you off guard. So it's growing pains, right? To me, it's growing pains. Now, on the technical side of it, ESPN, if they commit the money to it, God, yeah, they can definitely up the ante to it. I still think they're trying to figure out exactly what, because these broadcast crews, even the technical crews, they're going back to this arena for the first time over 20 years. And sometimes to brand new arenas that they haven't broadcasted it, right? So at the end, this is kind of a filling out year for them. I think that there's going to be a massive improvement for them next year, as we had, especially to the ESPN side of things. Bally Sports, it's Fox 2.0. They do a good job. I'm not saying it's a bad, but have they changed much? No, but at their end of it, they didn't really have to, right? They didn't really have to.
The only update that I would say that Bally Sports maybe needs a little bit better mobile app support. I think if you're trying to watch on their mobile stuff, and part of that, they always have an ad every time, and sometimes like I have to refresh the page because the app is not streaming correctly, and that's a very first world thing, and I get that. But like for me, I don't have a TV package, I don't have a cable subscriber, so that's how I'm able to watch the games, is actually through my parents' cable package, and that's those are important things to try to make sure that those are working correctly, because for me, that's the difference between me watching the game and not watching the game. So
right, and to your point, and this is again, those streaming platforms, those cost a lot of money to maintain, to update. When you even think of those advertisements, right now, without those ads, that streaming service is a hell of a lot worse, and you're probably broadcasting in 480i. So at the end, it's a catch-22. Again, I'm not worried about it. I think, again, for the most of the casual fans, or I should say, let me take that back and start again. For the fans who have followed the NHL rise to NBC and to NBCSN and have gotten to know some of those personalities, which call very good games, right? That at least in the U.S. I know Canada has had a very consistent voice up there with TSN, as well as Hockey Night Canada on CBC. Again, we're talking Chris Cuthbert, we're talking Gordon Miller. The departure of Jim Houston from CBC as their main guy this year was a little surprising, but sort of saw it coming when they brought over Chris Cuthbert. He started with CBC, went over to TSN, they brought him back. So there was a little bit of you could call a handing of the baton over from that, but they always do a fantastic job up there north of the border of the U.S. But again, that transition, there's always personality. Again, I think it's more of a subjective thing. I still think they do a decent job of broadcasting the games. And again, they're still figuring it out. ESPN will, and granted, when they do figure it out, they can put on a hell of a show. So again, you don't want to say be patient, but you kind of have to. I mean, this is how these things work, and you'll see a massive improvement next year. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, and their intro, I got to be honest, their intro is so iconic. Every time it comes on, I get chills. I really do. And it kind of brings me back to when I was a kid too, and watching the ESPN broadcast. I mean, I think it's an exciting thing that we have to look forward to. Nick, we're going to dive into a little bit about kind of broadcasting and that piece as well too, but I do want to throw it over our trivia question just went live. It is actually just noon, so I kind of want to see if you know it before somebody answers here. The question does read, of course, as always, first correct answer wins. We'll have to see if someone can get it quickly. Brett Larson, set to represent Team USA at the Winter Olympics. With consideration to both St. Cloud State men's hockey and St. Cloud State women's hockey, there were now 3 former Huskies that played in the 2018 Winter Olympics in South Korea. Who were they? Nick, can you name one of them? You're like, oh, God.
Oh, boy.
I'll tell you this.
Tough.
One of them is third in St. Cloud State men's hockey scoring with 178 career points. He's first in career assists with 113. One of them is for Team USA.
Women's. Okay.
Yeah, 2 of them are Team USA. One of them is Team Switzerland. That might help you out too.
Okay, one's because Kosala, he's Swedish or Finnish, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, oh Jesus, I should know this. This is so bad. For the women's side, wasn't Alder over there? No, not yeah. That's Janine Alder.
Yep,
okay,
you got the women's answer correct.
Yeah. And then for the men's, oh Jesus, this is bad.
This one is challenging. I think it's going to be 2 guys that you might not particularly expect.
Probably not. I'm trying to remember because that would have been that team. I know.
Yeah, this is I would not get this up.
It's not Ryan Lash, is it?
It's not Ryan Lash. I would not get this off the top of my head. I really wouldn't. The one that I referenced to is Garrett Rowe.
Garrett Rowe. Oh,
yeah,
Jesus.
That one's an interesting one because he hasn't played since the late aughts, essentially, 2007 to 11. So that one's a challenge. The other one's more recent defenseman. Let's see if you can get this one.
Wasn't a Sean, was it?
No.
Can you tell me the year?
Buffalo Sabres draft pick.
Oh, was it? What's his face? It was Will Borgen.
Yeah, Will Borgen is the other one.
I remember that now. Yeah, now that you said that rings a bell.
Yeah, I really love the photo of Garrett Rowe, though, because Garrett Rowe is a little bit older. So we'll have to see if someone can figure it out. It's kind of interesting when we go through the trivia questions, too. I'm going to say that it's going to take whoever wins the trivia thing, it's going to take them a handful of seconds to figure this one out and be able to type all 3 of them. But I thought it was very fitting. I mean, how often? The other question that I thought about, but would be too easy, I would imagine. Nick, who is the last coach to lead an international U.S. team?
That's Motzko.
And what team was that?
That was the World Juniors in 19 or 18? No,
17.
17, yeah. Right.
Who scored the game winner for the U.S. to win a gold medal in that game? Do you remember?
Wasn't that Troy Terry?
It is Troy Terry.
Yes.
Troy Terry had 4 for 4 in the shootout.
Scory Terry.
Yeah, in the shootouts in the semifinal against Russia, he had 3, and then he had the game winner against.
He's slick, man. He is slick.
You know what's interesting is I was actually on a road trip. I was actually in Greeley, Colorado, so we were actually playing in Colorado that weekend, and Troy Terry scored to win that when we were on the road on Thursday. We played Friday, Saturday, and then Saturday night the Pioneers were actually playing their second game of the weekend against ASU, and Troy Terry actually was in the lineup that night. He came back, he scored 2 goals and a 5-3 win. I actually think he scored and he got hurt. So he scored the game winner for the US I think it was in Toronto, flew back the next day, watched the game, or got back, when the guys were playing on Friday, jumped in the lineup, scored 2 goals and got hurt on Saturday, and then missed like 2 weeks. And now he
had a busy week, right? So
yeah, he's actually had he's cooled off a little bit, but had a really great start for the
Anaheim Ducks.
Anaheim Ducks. He was a point per game player. It was like a 16-game point streak for him. So pretty impressive for him to kind of jump in. So we're still waiting on our winner here. I don't see that we have a winner just quite yet. And some of those things, it's interesting to see how long it takes people to figure them out. We've had some stumpers that I definitely didn't anticipate them being difficult. And I've had some where I'm like, yeah, this will take someone forever. And they're like, oh, that's easy. It's this person, this person, this person. I'm like, oh, okay. But I enjoy when my goal is to put it where you have to think about it a little bit, but it shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes to find on the internet. That's my goal for most of the trivia questions, to see if bridge the gap between, you have to do a little bit of legwork if you're not quite sure, but it shouldn't take you, forever to be able to figure that out if you know where to look per se. So we're
Right.
still waiting on a winner. I'll definitely notify you when we get one. How awkward would that be if we do, if we don't get a winner by the end of this show?
Well, as they say, some things happen. So, speaking of, hockey topics, I wanted to bring up one to you,
Sure.
Noah, a little bit, just because I think we'll have a little bit of time to burn here. We talked about USA Hockey. We talked about, Brett Larson getting his gig. I guess, from a hockey standpoint, let's go with this. Do the Olympics have the same draw to you personally, with more college level talent going over versus NHL, or is this maybe not, or does it seem like it's a little bit less than that? I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the challenge is, unfortunately, because of the way that the world has kind of gone, I think the mental game that everyone has in their head is 2010 Vancouver, right? And I think that precedent was set so much. The golden goal for Canada, one of the best international games of all time, let alone, a matchup between two of the biggest powerhouses that in hockey at that particular moment. You have that. And then, of course, the 2016 World Cup of Hockey, Team North America was an interesting draw, and that was good too.
That was fun.
I think honestly, the appeal, I think, is really shifting. I don't know if it's shifting, but I think it's more focused on the World Juniors. I think the World Juniors, especially when it comes back, is going to be the marquee piece here, because as we kind of throw that piece in there, it's been consistent, albeit besides this year, but it's also kind of your age group. It's not, is it going to be an NHL group? Is it not going to be? Is it going to be college hockey players? Is it going to be guys from Europe? No, it's going to be the best American and Canadian and whoever players that are available and healthy to play in that tournament. They're going to represent their country. And it's cool because it's a stepping stone where you can go back and you can watch, right? The 2010 gold medal game, John Carlson, game winner in that wild fiasco against Canada. You go back and you look at all the NHL names littered in both of those lineups, and you get to see what they were at 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. That's exciting to me. And I think that it's always around Christmas time. It's always around the holidays. It's kind of your post Christmas reward or enjoyment before you get back into the new year. As you enter the new year, I think the World Juniors is starting to become the new primo international tournament. Now, if the NHL returns to the Olympics, does that change? But I think we have to have a normal Olympics again for, I think, that to really start to become part of the conversation. I think the World Juniors, the USA winning 2-0 against Canada, a great one. Matt Boldy was part of that team too. I think the World Juniors is starting to become the new primo aspect in the game of hockey right now on international play.
The other part of that is the Olympics are once every 4 years. World Juniors are every single year.
Right.
And again, for those who have never watched the World Juniors, it is the most high tempo. It is a very physical. It's like you said, that it's the best young talent under the age of 20 that's out there for most of these squads. And again, it's kind of like that college hockey atmosphere where a team could be up 4-1 and lose the hockey game. There's so many backs and forths. There's surprises. There's upsets. There's a couple of years ago, I forget whose storm was it, Switzerland, that had a big upset, I think, over Canada in the prelim. It was like, whoa, what happened here? So there's nothing that's predictable about the World Juniors. To me, my favorite part is, the 5 big guns: US, Canada, Finland, Sweden, and of course Russia. Although Russia, as of late, has kind of slid down the pipe. I think they'd be number 5. And a lot of that is just because, the Russian team is built on offense and offense exclusively. They've never been known to be a great defensive, a development program. So when they have the top end scores, they can do damage. When they don't, they're not as effective as they are in that tournament. Against Sweden and Finland, you talk about how they play 200-foot games. They're so tough to beat. But similarly, even though they play good defensively, offense, sometimes if it isn't there, not great. The U.S. has kind of established itself as probably a 1-2, and I would even think, Noah, too, that between a U.S. hockey fan and the Canada hockey fan, anytime that the U.S. and Canada meet, and it's almost like, okay, when is this going to meet in the semifinal? Is this going to be the gold medal matchup? What's the prelim game going to look like? Because there's bragging rights on the line. That's such a fun game to watch. I would challenge any hockey fan that's never watched the World Juniors to watch it and watch not just the U.S. and Canada, but those other teams you mentioned, Slovakia, Czechia, as they kind of rename themselves a little bit. These are great hockey games to watch. They're a lot of fun. They're very up tempo, and I think any hockey fan would be doing themselves a disservice by not watching these. Steve Mears, who now does full time for the Penguins, that was sort of his gig. He did a fantastic job with that. Dave Starman, friend of us, also was the analyst. Yeah, right. Good old Dave from New York does a fantastic job on the analysis of that tournament as well. So again, it's a lot of fun, as you mentioned. It's during the holidays every year. And it's just, I don't know. It's the best tournament. It's the one tournament I look forward to every year is the World Juniors, because again, there's so much excitement, so much drama that can happen.
So, Nick, I appreciate your monologuing. We had a trivia winner, and I think you'll enjoy this. Aaron Stanga was our winner, getting the victory. So good for him. He might potentially be the only live trivia winner in show history. So, well, right now he is currently. So congratulations, Aaron Stanga. Like we mentioned, Garrett Rowe and Will Borgen for Team USA on the men's side, and Janine Alder on the women's side for Team Switzerland were the correct answers to the trivia question. So, Nick, let's finish our discussion that we had gone. I really like the international questions, so it's a good time to talk about international hockey with everything that has been going on. But as we talk about the broadcast piece, ESPN, I think TNT has done a great job pitting Paul Bissonnette up with Wayne Gretzky studio-wise. Having a good studio analyst, a.k.a. the puck scribe, for Husky Productions, that's an important piece. It really is. It helps have two people, so Nick, sorry on that one. But it does help to have a round table of cast that they can bounce off of each other. I honestly thought even when NBC was there, I thought Anson Carter, I thought Patrick Sharp did a great job sometimes. Patrick
Sharpie was really good, yes.
Yeah, not to be weird about it, but Patrick Sharp, devilishly good-looking human being, by the way, so that helps the ratings too. But, I think it's important. I think Liam McHugh always did a really good job with those pieces too, and the way that he introed. But there's so many pieces that go into this. And I want to talk about, the game on Thursday against Boston. I know people were talking, some people were talking about the fact that the color analyst, one of them was female. I mean, Brian Boucher was part of that too. I'm like, some of the things that people are pointing out, I think that we get pampered a little bit by some great broadcasts that we do have, even at the ESPN level, at the TNT level, at the Bally Sports level, because then when you go and you see other broadcasts, you realize how professional and how good a lot of these broadcasters do a lot of the little things right. And they do a lot of the little things right. They're almost like goaltenders, because all the things they do right go unnoticed because they're so fluid in them, you don't notice them. And I think that stems to Thursday's broadcast too. And like you said, they're working out some of the production hinks and that sort of thing. But they did the rush sounds of the game. The commentator did, where you got to listen into the game only for 2 minutes. I thought that was really cool. I thought that as a broadcaster, and I can attest to this because I have a whiny, nasally voice all the time, you can't change your voice. You can't change how some of those aspects are. And some people have different deliveries based on the way their voice is. I thought the broadcast on Thursday was totally fine. I really I didn't listen to the game and I didn't go, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. But I didn't listen to the game and go, oh my gosh, this is so bad. I thought it was very fine for the NHL level. I think Brian Boucher does a fantastic job in the role that he's done too. Nick, I mean, if you can take people kind of with broadcasters, I mean, what makes a good broadcast? Like you said, it's subjective, but I mean, what are some of the things that people, as you've gotten to listen as a fan and now you've gotten to do it as a broadcaster, when you watch a game and you say that was a good broadcast, what are some things that you kind of pick out that you think are like, things that make a broadcast successful or enjoyable to listen to on your perspective?
Sure. So a little bit of history with me, right? So, when I'm in the car and I'm driving from the cities up to St. Cloud, mind you that, on a good day, that's about an hour drive. That's on a good day without any sort of snow and traffic and whatnot. I literally will pop on to broadcasts of Gary Thorne, or I'll pop on broadcasts again, Chris Cuthbert. I'll do Gordon Miller, who I think actually is a guy that I really try to emulate. And one thing that I've noticed, and it's sort of like you're trying to be the fan voice on the broadcast. I think what's so important is you have to be able to read the emotional ebbs and flows of the game. And I think that's what makes, the hashtag awesome guy, Ben Holden, so good at what he does. It's about,
great call yesterday, by the way. And
very good call there over with the Gophers and the Spartans. But you have to be able to read what's exciting and be able to make that exciting, and also to know that, okay, this was a chance, it wasn't that great, and so you're calling it, but you're also you're relaying the excitement from a fan's perspective. That's really what it is. I think that's the subtlety piece that often, as you mentioned, goes unnoticed. It's and it makes you. So if I make, as a broadcaster, a shot from the point that goes 20 miles an hour and sound like, it was like this Mario Lemieux deking out of somebody's jock type exciting, it doesn't match, right? So it's about reading, and I think obviously in hockey, because it happens so fast, I think having knowledge or having played the game helps too, because as you and I both know, whether it's an odd man rush or this and that, you can build tension in your voice like that, where it's like you understand this is an opportunity that may actually produce something. And then, or, as a hockey player, I think it's happened to both of us here, Noah, where you're standing on the weak side of the net, a puck just happens to come for you. We have a 6x4 open net, and for whatever reason, either you throw it over the net or through the crease, and you're just like, you look up to the sky. How do you miss that? And again, it's being able to challenge that, emotion from not only as a fan, but also maybe from a player at times. So the fans, because that they're probably feeling the same thing. Again, hockey is such a niche sport. A lot of folks have played it. A lot of folks, and I think that's the big thing. Hockey is such a knowledgeable fan base that they expect so much out of their broadcast crew. And I think you said it perfectly. We've been so spoiled with some of the really great, people who've won multiple Emmys, such as Mike Emmerich, to name a few. John Forsland, who's now with Seattle, who does a fantastic job. Let's remember Dave Strader back when he was still with us. Fantastic voice. It's hard to name them all, but at the end of the day, it does make you appreciate what you have. Again, Rick Peckham of Tampa, who's given me very personally now in the Broadcast Hall of Fame, he's given me specific pointers on stuff that I've sent him. Fantastic human being, and we're actually hoping to reconnect soon.
And even guys that go back to the college world. I mean, how good, you ever get a chance to listen to the radio? Jim Erickson, the fantastic job that he does. There's some fantastic radio announcers too, and I love listening to games on the radio. And like you mentioned, that anticipatory piece, right? Knowing that when a turnover is created and it's a 2-on-1, and knowing that think about, I think back to the goal that Patrick Kane scored all those years ago, that give and go against Jonathan Quick, where he puts an absolute laser up in the playoffs and does the heartbreaker at center ice. I mean, if you call that very flatly, I mean, it doesn't have the same emotion, but you can see it in the building where the turnover is created and everybody in the building starts to stand up, and you match that energy. So you're definitely right about anticipating and knowing what plays are incredible, and also recognizing, some of my favorite ones are recognizing a play where a guy comes in and he shoots, and like, for example, at the null level, when I do work for the Taros, the press box is so low that if you get the right shooting angle, you can see where a shooter has the mentality where he's trying to go, far side glove, and he just misses it. And it was like, oh, he had some room there, and being able to see those things too, and be like, ooh, like that was actually a pretty good little opportunity. And picking up those little pieces too. I also think for broadcasters, obviously at the national level, but moving into college level, moving into student level work, one of the things that's important too is having a good technical side of things, knowing how to have a good command of your levels, knowing how to have a good command of the sound, your transitions, because especially with radio, you can be a one-man crew in a radio setting if you're good enough technically to be able to have command of your own broadcast. It goes back, podcasting is the same thing too. So, those are things that I think, make a good broadcast. Yeah, there are some times where people kind of struggle, but I go back to the cliche phrase, Nick. It's like, you know what? If you think you're so good at it, go do it. If you're a fan. Otherwise sit there and enjoy it. Now, are there some people that I would prefer over others in terms of the broadcasting world? Yeah, absolutely. We all have our favorites and people that we love their delivery. But honestly, my mom always used to say this. And at first I thought I was like, shut up, this is super cheesy. But as I get older, I kind of agree with it. She says, you know what? She goes, not everybody's perfect, but she goes, sometimes I was just happy to have someone who was talking me through the game and letting me know what was going on. And someone was willing to do the work. And I was like, you know what? You're right. Going from high school all the way up to the NHL. Obviously, guys get paid as they get better at it, but there is an appreciation to someone taking the time and putting together the production crew. Imagine what hockey would be if we didn't have production crews to bring you the game on TV every night. And then you had people back at Sportsnet who package up the replay and put it on YouTube 20 seconds after their thing happens. All of those things I think we take for granted sometimes. And there's people behind every one of those actions.
There are, and I think you said it perfectly. Is there's so many more people that you don't see on camera that make this happen. In fact, going through, just about how many different cameras are being operated, right? To the guy who's making sure the audio is good, to the director who's changing camera takes on the fly, the producer who's trying to tell the story, to the in studio, like you said, it's a coordinated ballet. It really is. And it's one of those where, TV is never perfect. If there's one thing that I've really learned over these past 12 months, especially working with HP now in my third year in various different roles. And obviously here with the podcast and different radio bits and whatnot is, TV is about making something that's so imperfect look like it was meant to happen. I wish, if there's any one thing that I know everybody can see, right? It's that little IFB. It's that little earpiece that every broadcaster wears. And of course, if you're the play-by-play, the big, microphones, that's earmuffs. You're getting one person here. You're getting one person there. You're trying to think of what's happening and talk at the same time. It's a skill.
Yes,
because again, it's one of those, I could do that. But then you have, again, your producer in one ear going, next whistle card one, which, for everybody, it's like, to give you a good example, it's LaPanta going, let's pause for 15 seconds for a word from X sponsor, right?
Right.
And then your director's going, okay, after this break, we're going to have a rollout, or as I say, video of the last 2 goals from the Wild. So just make a comment on those, as we go to break kind of thing. So you have people constantly feeding you information. You're having to organize it. You're going to have, you have to prioritize it too. So even more so stats, right? And
then it changes on you where you expect to go to break and then all of a sudden a scrum breaks out or, and then it's all about timing. All that thing has to be in a specific timing piece and then
it gets busted.
Yeah. And then for intermissions, your face might be on TV too during all of that.
Right. It's and like you said, that's the part that I was about to get to, was that you could have all this play and all of a sudden, like you mentioned, something happens, something crazy. And then all of a sudden all that's like, we're scratch all that, talk about this, talk about that. Great goal. Like I said, there's a line brawl between Vancouver and Calgary in the middle of Center Ice and Rogers Center. So, that's the name of the game, is you have to be willing to adjust on the fly. Obviously having some stats and being fed to you and having some tidbits and storylines. Again, when you're talking to coaches a couple of days before the matchup and you're trying to get their thoughts and you're trying to incorporate the storyline into the broadcast, there's so many, as you mentioned, the little things that go unnoticed because it's so fluid, and you forget also the prep work it takes to get to that. So
yes, your prep work is a huge piece. And that can really save you if you're unfamiliar with the team or you're unfamiliar with things. Hockey knowledge is a great thing too. And the other thing is repetitions. I remember the first game I ever did. I mean, I had a headache for like 2 days after because of the cerebral overload. And now, of course, I don't want to say I don't hardly prep, but I have all my notes and my stats in front of me. And then I don't actually write out my pregame shows anymore. Like the things that I want to talk about, I practice now being able to do it fluidly and being able to do it, because now that makes me more comfortable that if you walk up to the booth and you say, Noah, can you jump on for 5 minutes and do this? Now I can do that fluidly and be able to do that without things in front of me. Obviously, it's good to have those things, but then as you get better and better and get more repetitions, you learn how to do different things. You do a podcast, you do a radio broadcast, you do a TV broadcast, all of those different areas will make you so much better in those pieces too. I thought it was interesting. It's actually during the Wild game, and the female commentator, I failed to remember her name, unfortunately, but she was kind of getting amped up with the excitement of a goal that was just scored, and she was actually peaking. And for those who don't know what peaking is, it's when your levels kind of like it gets scratchy. It's too high, and you get that like scratchy
static
click.
Static,
kind of. And she started to get that. And of course, it just so happened that her point when she was talking was like a minute long. So I'm like, the producer's probably just sitting there going, oh my God, like, please wrap up this point. But what I'm saying is, As soon as she got done with that, in my head, I'm like, well, her producers are going to say, move the mic away from your face. Because I don't know if they have a board in front of them as the broadcast crew, but it's probably more production side of the NHL level. And I said, they're either going to tell her to turn her levels down or to pull the mic away from her face, and she's not going to sound scratchy. And the next thing she said 10 seconds later was much quieter and much calmer. And those are little things that you don't think about until they go wrong or they're not perfect, and then it sticks out like a sore thumb. So there is a lot of talent and a lot of juggling that you have to be able to do. And first of all, you have to be comfortable doing things live. You have to be comfortable on camera or on a microphone being able to talk to people, and then you get to a point where you don't think about it and you do become better and better each time. So what we're trying to say, I think, on social media is, yeah, there are some broadcasts that, let's be real, even at that level, aren't the greatest, but at the same time, people are trying their best. And you know what? It's a lot harder than it looks. So I think that's an important piece to kind of remember. Nick, did you have anything else to add? Or should we say sayonara to the fans? Kind of a longer episode, an hour and 25 minutes, 24 minutes, something like that. So we are happy to have all of us with you.
For those, I guess the thing is, for those who are listening, my job search is officially open at the end of it. So last semester starts on Monday. So 2 days. It's my first day at school. That's weird. But as I've mentioned to you many times off camera, Noah, and as many times as
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. So Nick's 35, in case we haven't touched on that already. I totally had the Billy Madison vibes where sitting in a classroom of second graders. I'm so sorry.
But to that point, I used to put more stock actually into my age. I used to actually think, going into this, when I went back to school at 30, I know what I'm getting myself into. I took a huge roll of the dice. I bet a lot of money and time on myself to do this. And at the end of it, graduating is probably 5% of the goal. The 95 is, can you get a job in the field? So for those who are watching, those who like what I do, and I can definitely show you all the things that I can do, especially with different segments, on-air broadcasting. My eventual goal is play-by-play in the NHL. If you know some folks who would like to reach out, please go to huskieswarminghouse.com. You'll see all my contact information there. And please, I'm definitely willing and ready to talk about what I can bring to a broadcast, and definitely expertise that I bring, especially from a National Hockey League level, being a former TSN analyst. Again, done plenty of games for the Huskies, both television and radio. I'm ready to go. So that's the next frontier.
Can you juggle though?
It depends on what I'm juggling.
Plates, yes, for sure.
Not plates. I'll break them.
Well, kind of ish. I mean, I feel like serving's a juggling act, kind of ish, isn't it? I mean,
not really. If you're juggling, the food is not on the plate at that point. So,
well, it could be worse. Could be a pizza upside down on somebody.
That's true.
It's a fantastic story. If you haven't got a chance to check it out, episode 93 was I thought that was a really good episode. A lot of the topics that we talked about. Of course, if you really want to go back, hearing about Brett Larson, the Olympics, episode 92 happened just before the Christmas holiday. We got to sit down with Brett Larson and associate head coach Dave Shayak and listen to their kind of trivia battle, and some of the things that they had going on there was exciting to touch on them as well. But that will do it for episode number 94. I think episode 95 should be a regularly normal release on our normal Sunday, and we will see you soon here in the den.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies
Kaprizzov in for a chance to win it. He scores! Karil the Thrill is for real. Welcome to the NHL. A game winner.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.